Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's a minute or so after 3. I think it's time we got cracking. I always think it's nice to hang on for more people to arrive, but I'm grateful for those people who made it on time. And let's get started, because anyone who misses the beginning can always catch up afterwards. And just to sort of confirm that anybody has to go, there'll be a link sent afterwards from the webinar so you can see what was said after the point you left. So my name is Russell Thackeray, and I work for a company called QED. We're an organisational development company that specialises in change for HR and L&D departments as well as organisations. And we have 2 specific sub-practices, one which is all about training evaluation and the sort of hard metric side of life. And the other is about, because of our work and change, it's about personal resilience and the need to have great personal resilience in times of change. As a practitioner myself, I've worked in this area for many years as a psychologist, but also as someone who brought into the UK the idea of emotional intelligence with a number of colleagues of mine 20 years or so ago, when we created the Centre for Applied Emotional Intelligence. So something I've been fascinated something I've been fascinated in for a long, long time. And it is quite interesting today how managers who didn't like the term emotional intelligence do seem to like the words resilience. And as emotional intelligence is part of it, it's a good way to get some of those very strong tools and techniques into play. So that's me. That's what we're all about. So please feel free to send questions below. As we go, I'll be collating them and answer them at the end, if that's okay. So let's get going. This is the webinar overview. I do know that most people attend webinars either because they know nothing and they want a bit of an overview, which I should do, because they know lots and they want confirmation, but they also sometimes want answers to specific questions. So please do send those and I'll have a look at them. If I can't answer them within the time frame we have here, I'm very happy to send you an email afterwards or touch base by phone as part of this webinar process. So hopefully that's an offer I can make that if you need to take up on, you can. So first question, the perennial, what is resilience? And I think most people would agree that the most traditional term is the ability to bounce back. In fact, I think the Americans have termed bounce back ability as something that's all in vogue at the moment. And certainly in terms of organizations, in terms of people, economies, currencies, nationalities, and individuals, resilience is something that applies to people because it is part of a process. And therefore, as part of a process, it's something that has skills within it and can be learned and developed. So resilience for me is a toolkit for human beings to be able to really change their performance. Now, for me, there's no point just having someone that can bounce back after change, but be quite hopeless all the way through it, or being a drama queen, or being vulnerable, or not performing. So for me, resilience has 4 elements to it. Yes, you have to bounce back afterwards, but you also have to be good at dealing with pressure and stress in the moment. That ability just to get on, focus, and to really deliver is something that resilience really gives people. Being knocked off course, feeling vulnerable, losing your focus, all those things that can happen with pressure and stress in the moment are part of what the resilience toolkit can help you deal with. However, you can see we've still got some spaces. So as part of this 4-stage process, I'm very keen on the idea that we know ourselves well enough to understand the gear change that's required when our resilience is being compromised and the trigger points where our increased resilience is needed. And this means we have to be pretty good as humans in terms of knowing ourselves and being pretty good at sensing and being sensitive to the environment around us. And that's not always the case, especially for people who are encountering stress. And the bit before, of course, as in any process, we have to build the capacity. We have to invest first in order to be able to use the resilience that we build. So it's a bit like a bank account. If we put resilience in, when we need it, we can draw it out. Now, people say, why is it important? And I think the case is one, really. There's tons of stuff in the literature that says all these things are true. And the issue seems to be not that the battle is won about the fact that resilience is important. It's just the problem with proving it almost. And we know all these things are true. We have seen them. People have delivered these things across many, many resilience projects. But I think what we're seeing is 2 phases of resilience. The first phase is sort of run through now, and it's sort of it's really focused on health and well-being, maybe a little bit of health and safety. But I think people are starting to see that resilience needs to deliver more at a more practical level. And certainly we've noticed that resilience is useful both at a micro and macro level. By that I mean with an individual, but also at an organization. I mean, I noticed the people of the Northwest recently described themselves as being resilient because after the floods they were up and trading within days, and that was what resilience is really all about. It. We all have it within us. The issue is that it can be used up, and that can be a problem for us. So we see lots of good evidence in terms of these things. So I'm sure most people in HR have one are sort of sold on the idea that resilience is good because of all these different things. But some of the more organizational, operational numbers are starting to change, and things like this are becoming important. I mean, yes, we all understand engagement, but most critically, there was a couple of programs we've run recently where we've actually affected these things. So for me, resilience is about something as tangible as productivity. You know, hundreds of percent return on investment can be generated from people who are just more resilient. Now, whilst that's part of a personal development toolkit, it's important to know that it has practical application in the workplace. So for me, I'm happy to put my throw my hat in the ring and say that there is absolute tangible value that's generated from resilience, whether it be courses, coaching, just general awareness and development. There's no doubt that having people who are fit, well, active, less stressed, feeling less pressure in the world are people who can perform better over the course of time. So time for a quiz. There are lots of people in the world who we deem to be resilient and some who are not. So here's a list. I can see normally I give you a prize if you can spot all these people, but it's going to be tricky on the webinar today. But I think you'll recognize most of these people. And what it shows is that a lot of these people have been successful, but some of them have needed props. They've needed substances to help them with their performance, whether it be drugs or alcohol or something more remedial. And I think the point about resilience is that we get more resilient the more we cope and bounce back from things if we build a toolkit. So people like J.K. Rowling were rejected famously many, many times, but didn't give up. They had that focus and determination to carry on. Richard Branson famously can cope with a lot of stress and pressure in the moment. But there's one person who copes with pressure most of all, is the person at the top left, which is some of you will remember it being a guy called Chesley Sullenberg, who was the chap who landed the plane in the river on the Hudson. And he's someone who could deal with pressure. Now, pressure is different to stress. And I think one of the challenges we have in resilience is we need to understand the difference. We sometimes say that pressure is a sort of an event-based thing. It's an event which has a lot of importance, it has a lot of significance, it has a lot of benefits, but also has a lot of risks. So you can easily turn a standard presentation into a very pressurized situation by telling yourself the most important presentation you're ever going to do is going to affect the rest of my life, and get yourself in a state. And that's how you can pressure yourself. And there are different techniques to dealing with pressure than there are with stress, because pressure is what you do in the moment. Stress is how you deal with what effectively is about overwhelm. And we use a very simple three-stage idea here to think about how we deal with stress. So most people, if they're looking at volume, in other words, how many tasks there are, for example, how much control you have over them and over what time period. Most people can control a lot of stress, a huge amount, over a short time period. People can deal with stress over a long period as long as the volume's not too high. So there are quite simple techniques to be able to deal with overwhelm. So for example, prioritizing, circles of concern, things like that. We're all familiar with some of those tools. But one of the best books I've ever read on this subject is a book called Essentialism, which I'd absolutely recommend you have a look at, because that really focuses on this idea that if you're doing the right things, you will be less stressed because you'll only be doing the things that actually matter. And sometimes that's not obvious in the world. So let's have a look at some of the cultural impacts of this. Just checking that some of the technology is actually working, because it is on where I am. Hopefully it is where you are. In terms of culture, one of the challenges we see in resilience are a few indicators that you need to look out for. And the first thing is that there is not enough conflict in your organization. I know that seems strange, but actually the more disagreement, the more difference there is in an organization, the more conflict you'd have. I'm not talking about people fighting, but I'm talking about conflict as being a manifestation of difference. So it's something you need to look out for. If there is an insufficient conflict, it's something you need to watch out for, because that will drive away resilience. And I work with a lot of organizations at the moment who have leaders who are frightened of their people, because they're frightened to disagree. They're frightened to have the difficult conversations because their people get bent out of shape, because their people are not resilient. Obviously, whenever you hear the word time, you know you've got a resilience problem, because you haven't got organizations sorted. And let's be really clear, change is always negative if you have low resilience, because one of the key things about anyone with high resilience is what they choose to believe comes true for themselves. So one of the things we've done is developed a PR questionnaire, or a set of questionnaires, which I'm just going to whiz through for you. They work for teams, cultures, leaders, or personal resilience. And it's important to understand this, that performance itself is based on two things. It's based around your resilience, of course, but also about your job skills. If you have poor job skills and high resilience, your performance will be poor. If you have the reverse, that will also drive poor performance. So it's about getting a balance between those two areas. So please don't believe that I'm advocating that you don't do any training. So in other words, you know, if you have a footballer that's always ready to go on the pitch, but actually can't kick a ball, that's sort of hopeless, really. So one of the things we've got to do is get really pragmatic about resilience and its use. And our model that we put together helps us understand this. So we deal with people's potential, and we have some resilience strategies, which handily make out the word ropes. So we can actually have a rope symbol. And as it says at the bottom, enhanced performance comes from resilience plus competence. So we're not saying you should remove one from the other. It's about balancing the two. So our physiology, we use a lot in resilience, both in the moment by using diaphragmatic breathing exercises to help us get a grip of pressure situations, but also to build capacity through good sleep, good diet. And there's a growing trend in mindfulness, which is linked to sort of Buddhist ideas, which is around sort of meditation, such like. But there's also mindfulness, which is very practical, because mindfulness is about not making judgments in the moment. So it's possible to practice mindfulness in a waking state whilst you're still at work. And it's a very useful skill to get hold of. Cognition's all about your ability to get a grip of your thoughts, get a grip of your mind, and use your mind to allow yourself to understand the emotional intelligence piece, which is that we make choices every day about what we think, what we feel, and what we do. Most people don't believe they have the choices to feel what they want to feel, to do what they want to do, and to emote in the way they want to emote. And actually that's a problem, because more people describe everything as a feeling, and rather than understanding that most of the things we think are feelings are really thoughts. So people say they feel aggrieved. Well, they don't feel aggrieved, that's a thought. People say they've felt annoyed because someone's wandered through the office and upset them. Well, part of that's really just the thought. And understanding the difference between emotions, thoughts, and feelings is a critical part, because using our physiology to help us deal with the emotional centers of our brain, by linking in the prefrontal cortex thinking centers of our brain, allows us to get a grip of our actions. And if we want to be focused and on the money in the moment when we're performing, we need to get these things right. So just to have a look at this ropes toolkit a bit more, it's about 5 different things. Regulation. This is about self-awareness, and we've all heard that phrase. And I've met lots of people on mountaintops doing self-awareness, and I don't mean that. I mean knowing yourself, really, and being practical about it. And it's also about sort of saying that, well, you can be as self-aware as you want, but actually if you can't put it into practice, if you can't regulate your behavior, if you can't have practical knowledge, practical skills, then you cannot use this element of emotional intelligence. So we have to get slightly real about this. And regulation is all about productivity. One of the gifts we get every day is feedback. But actually, if we're defensive, if we feel threatened, if we think we're upset every time someone tells us something, then we don't see feedback as a gift. And so one of the key things in regulation and in culture is to make sure that we're getting as much feedback as we need, not necessarily as we want. The next area is optimism, and I think most people would agree that the case for success and optimism, and performance and success and optimism, is well won again. And optimism is about 2 different things. It's about expectation, and it's about attribution. Now, a lot of people use a technique called defensive pessimism, and what they do there is say, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be terrible, oh my God, it's going to be awful. But it wasn't as bad as I thought. But actually, that really does limit our expectations of ourselves. And most of our performance is driven by what we want for ourselves and what we think we're capable of. So the more we can liberate ourselves in the way we think, the better we can be. And there's a ton of things we can do about optimism, and I can't go into them all here because there's so many. But if anybody wants to get the book Flourish by Marty Seligman, it's a great introduction to positive psychology, and that will get you going. Purpose. There's no doubt if you know where you're going, you've got a greater chance of getting there, because our brains are goal optimization machines, and the more you can feed direction into them, the more they'll help you get there. But purpose is also important for perspective, and what matters is that when something's happening to us, a change or something, if we can see it in the light of where we're going, we've got a greater chance of being able to accept it. And it's really important that we use visualization, highlight reels, whatever we want to use to be able to have a life plan that gives us what we want to go. The next thing is energy. This is physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy. This feeds our confidence, it feeds our extroversion, it allows us to have great relationships. And energy in this sense is all about how we oxygenate the brain by breathing appropriately. And most people actually discover that they breathe incorrectly. They don't use their diaphragm to breathe. They use the upper part of their chests and end up actually stressing themselves and stressing their physiological system because of a lack of breathing. Now, if I was going to recommend one thing you have a look at is this idea of breathing more skillfully as time rolls on. Lastly, is our ropes methodology, is this idea of stamina. Stamina is grit, tenacity, focus, whatever you really want to call it, but we call it stamina. And it's about sticking to it. It's about putting the effort in place, about having the habits you need to make sure that you deliver what you need to deliver. Now, that doesn't mean about you have to be a perfectionist and deliver more than is required. Or you have to look, you have to get this idea of what's good enough rather than what's perfect to be able to deliver. And so part of stamina is to be able to acquire rationally your habits to understand what's going on. I think the work of the Stoics has influenced me in this sort of area. And if anyone's ever read the works of Marcus Aurelius, they'll get some quite interesting takes on the idea of stamina. Just getting up, getting over yourself, and getting on with it every single day. Now, I've talked a lot about habits, and a lot of people say, how do you change a habit? Is it 21 days? There's no real evidence that that's true, but certainly we have to rewire the brain. But here's some key things to help you. Make choices. It is a skill. You can start with a small habit, substitute new habits, go cold turkey on a habit, wean yourself off. A good thing that I use is to develop new habits around it and remove triggers, create rewards, all those sorts of good things. Many of you will know these things. But the critical thing here is that what we know from psychology is too many decisions a day stops us being able to actually change habits. And it's one of the challenges in change management, that humans get fatigued from making decisions. So all the best decisions should be made in the morning when your brain's optimized. And there's no doubt that if you want to make a habit change happen, especially in a working environment, social rewards and punishments are the key. If you have a betting pool with your colleagues and something riding on the fact that you're going to change something, it's astonishing how often it changes. So just to recap, this is our sort of toolkit, this is our model. It allows you to snapshot your resilience. And if your resilience is being compromised, it allows you to have a think about what you might do about those different things. Now, as we've been chatting, I've been going for about 20 minutes, that's certainly long enough for me to be droning on. We've got some questions in, so let me just have a look and see what's going on. Okay, so someone said here, can building resilience change my behavior? The answer is yes, because your behavior is a function of your resilience and vice versa. And your behavior comes from your ability to learn, and your resilience and your confidence and your self-confidence and self-esteem is part of your resilience. With a limited training budget, who should I develop first? That's a great question. Let me think now. We have got to try. It's easiest to say train the top team first, but sometimes they're the people with the least ability to do this stuff, actually. So maybe the maybe if you have a limited budget, you should be training the training team so they can actually do a trainer type thing and then roll these ideas out. And there's so much in the subject area that it's actually a challenge to actually limit it to certain things, which is why we use our ropes methodology. Let's see, let's have a look down here. Blah blah blah. After training, how do I make sure it's used in the workplace? I think you need to talk to our evaluation side on learning embedding rather than this one. How do I know how resilient I am? There is no absolute measure of resilience. It's completely subjective, and it's down to every human being. It is a number of intangible measures linked together. So that's good news because it's a development area. It's not about a comparative measure, it's about a journey traveled measure in your own development. Finally, what are your five top tips that will help me improve my resilience? Number one, breathe. That's about building capacity and coping with pressure in the moment. Martin Seligman's book Flourish, great. Eat well. Dino, I can't say the guy's name. Dino Danjin, I forget him. Eat well. get a diet rich in macronutrients. There are plenty of dietary things out there. 30 minutes walking a day. Get a life plan. That's absolutely key. And the critical thing of all, know you've got choices. Choices are the thing that allow you to think, feel, and do what you want to do. And that is all about your performance. So I think they're the most salient questions that have come in for the moment. So if that's all, I think it's 3:25 now. Thank you all very much. This webinar is now over. And what we'll do is make sure that people online who want a link can have a look at the webinar again. If you want to talk to me directly, there's my mobile. If you want to send an email, there's my email. If you want to look at our two sites, personalresilience.com or qedod.com to see the work we do. Thank you all very much.